Join lifelong Star Wars fans Lauren and Steph as they dive into the world of Star Wars fan fiction, discussing a new fic each month, breaking down the writing style, characters, canon relationship, and more. This is your source for Star Wars fan fiction recommendations. So come on and find out why it's one hell of a fanfic. Hey y'all, and welcome to One Hell of a Fanfic. I'm Steph, and I'm joined here with Lauren today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I am still coming off of the high of Mando this morning that I'm going to try to not just sit here and talk all about Mando.
Same. I just finished watching it, and then I watched Bad Batch right at the end of that, and then we came here, and now I gotta switch gears.
Right. Yeah, don't get your stories mixed up. That's what I was afraid of earlier too.
I mean, they do kind of still have that same vibe, though, that like parenthood vibe between Shmi and what happened in this fanfic, and then Paz
Oh, that's
Vizsla.
so true.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And you know what else is a similar vibe is Gungans. That's another similar vibe that we're possibly having that I'm very excited about.
Okay, so let's jump into this fan fiction. So this month, we read In All Your Wanderings by MirandaTam, which was finished back in 2016 and had about 16,000 words. So I finished it during work today, honestly. It took me like maybe an hour and a half to finish. There is no spice at all in here. I thought there was going to be, at one point, there was like a hope, but there wasn't. There wasn't.
Wait,
Um,
between who? Wait, who was it that you were hoping?
Um, at one point, a door opened or something, and there was like a Jedi that came through, and I was like, yes! And then nothing.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like a
I
small
totally
spark,
missed that.
and then the spark just died. I was like, well,
Yeah, I completely missed that part. That's funny though.
tropes here. What tropes is this another found family?
I
Like,
mean, this one
home?
wasn't super there weren't any tropes that really jumped out at me. I mean, I guess you
Yeah,
could say that all of Star Wars has found family to a certain extent, but
yeah.
there wasn't really anything that super jumped out at me in this one.
Something that I did find cool is that this fan fiction has someone translated into French. So you don't see that very often. Normally it's like Spanish if there is, but no, French. And there's also a couple of other fan fictions that were inspired by this one specifically.
Oh, that is so cool. So the author summary is pretty short and sweet. It's just passion yet serenity, which that's a piece from the Jedi Code. And what that line kind of sums up that we see in this fic is that Shmi is really good at balancing those things, as we're gonna get more into later. But what really happens is that Shmi leaves Tatooine with Anakin and goes to the Jedi Temple with him. So they're kind of doing it as a team rather than them having to be separated at the beginning. Why would you say people should read this?
I think anyone that is a fan of a story just kind of jumping in and jumping right to the storyline, this is perfect for them. It's not a slow burn. There's something happening always, um, but it's not overwhelming. It just kind of goes through like what we've seen in an entire movie, but in a small fan fiction.
Yeah, the pacing feels really natural, like the way that we move through those scenes and those different plot points. It's just kind of like taking you right through it without it feeling like too much being thrown at you. For me, I think it's also, in addition to what you said, what it's doing with Shmi's character is really cool. Like, we're seeing sides of her that I feel like we probably suspected were there, but we're actually getting a chance to dive deeper into those. And that's what really stood out to me about this one. And I also liked too how it followed the progression of the Phantom Menace as well. So if you love Phantom Menace, then you'll probably enjoy this fanfic.
It is alternate universe, like a canon divergent kind of a story. And yeah, you do get, while it diverts from canon, you do get the same storyline happens, just a little bit
Yeah.
different.
It's like the same scenes for the most part, but different things are happening in the scene.
Okay, so jumping into segment two, this is where spoilers start. So if anyone wants to know spoilers, turn back now. So let's talk about writing style. What did you think of how it was written?
So I liked it how we really got to see inside Shmi's head. Like even though it was third person, it still felt very up close and personal. And we really spent more time inside her head. We really didn't see inside any of the other characters' thoughts other than Shmi. So it's pretty much entirely from her perspective. And I also liked it how the writing style of this author, it's kind of like I've heard this sort of writing style described as it's like you're looking through a window, meaning the writing, it's not drawing a ton of attention to itself. It's just like giving you something to look through to see the story playing out. So it's very like subtle in what it's doing, but you're getting all the information that you need for the story. And that kind of writing style can be really nice sometimes.
I really liked that the person who was writing it, you can just you could feel the maturity of the characters. Sometimes you'll get a writer that like they're talking about an adult, but they're writing it through like a kid's, and it doesn't match. This had such harmony with the way that the characters were portrayed, along with how the writing was done.
Yeah, it felt very true to life in that way. What did you have any thoughts about the characters?
I think that the author captured Yoda pretty perfectly, from like the way he speaks, which I mean any of us can figure out, but she did it really well, to how mischievous he is in some ways, but also calm and wise, and he would sit down and listen to anybody and take other people's thoughts into his own perspective and really think it over.
Yeah, another thing I loved about Yoda's portrayal too is I thought it was funny how in the author notes at the end of one of the chapters, they were writing in the notes that like Yoda's dialogue was like way harder than they thought it would be. And I was like, "Well, you nailed it." So
Right. Effortlessly done. I so one of the things that like I didn't find is like harmonious with the actual with canon is how the council members were yelling at each other and really in an uproar. That's more of what we see in the Senate versus the actual Jedi Council. Where I get why they would say that and why like the author would portray it that way, but it's more dramatized than I think we would actually see. But I understand, like from a writing perspective, it makes sense. But I if the people like I think in canon, like if there was this kind of a situation that happened in the council chambers, it would be a lot more calm and have specific fancy ways of saying all of the things they're angry about.
a little bit more passive aggressive
Yes, very
rather
much
than
so.
outwardly aggressive.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that maybe they were kind of like taking this is just kind of like my interpretation of it. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but it felt like they were taking like the disagreements that we know existed in the council and kind of just like dialing them up. Um, but like you kind of the commonalities of where it's coming from makes sense, but it was just in this alternate universe, their reactions were like way more extreme.
All right. I know you have something to say about Qui Gon. So what is it?
Yes, this Qui-Gon slander. Qui-Gon slander. But no, you know what's funny is that as I was reading this, I was like, wait a second, is this how Qui-Gon is coming across to some people? Like, did I just never consider this? Or is this and I even went back and read the author notes. I was like, is there something? So I don't know. Like you know, I love Qui-Gon. Like Qui-Gon in
Yes.
my book has never done anything wrong. So this portrayal of Qui-Gon was tough for me. Um, but I guess I'm wondering if it has to do with how, like, in canon, he's not successful in freeing Shmi. And so I could see that, like, kind of like changing how people view him. Like maybe he's not as good as he set out to be.
Yeah, like he
Um,
didn't try hard enough.
right. And like I think that maybe the way I look at it is like I have a very sympathetic view of Qui-Gon because of how much I love him. So I do have some Qui-Gon bias. So I was like, I guess for me, like when I think about Qui-Gon, I assume that based on what I know of Qui-Gon from other materials, I assume that he would have done everything he could, and maybe we just didn't see it all play out on screen.
Right.
But people that don't feel that way, I could see them not being as in love with Qui-Gon as I am. So
Yes, you are. It really comes through with you.
yes. But I will say that despite my Qui-Gon disagreement, I felt like this fic, it really did excel in that portrayal of Shmi's character. Like kind of what I mentioned briefly in like our opening thoughts. Shmi, you can tell in canon, you can tell that she's very wise. And unfortunately, like we don't really get to see a ton of examples of that. But in this fic, you do. Like, there's lots of examples. There's her, she's giving Padme advice. She's giving Obi-Wan advice. Like, she's giving some of the wisest characters in Star Wars advice.
Right.
And so I thought that was really cool to get to see her like having more of a role in that way.
Yeah. I really like how taking that one character and putting it amongst all of the characters we know, how it kind of changes everybody and changes viewpoints simply because you have that perspective of a mother, which is something that a lot of them just don't, they've never had. Um, and I think that it will, if we were to see another fan fiction after that, continue to see that chain of events, the domino effect of her perspective on a lot of these issues, including attachment, and how Yoda is willing to listen to her in that.
And in addition to that too, like she's giving people advice and she's helping to guide people, but she also cares a lot about people making their own decisions too. So she has a really good balance of like she has the life experience to kind of know what she's talking about in a lot of cases, but it's also important to her that other people come to their own conclusions too. Like there's that one scene where she's encouraging Anakin to make his own decision where she's like, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do it. Like your life is your own and it's up to you. And so I thought that was really cool as well to see her kind of like be able to do both of those things.
So, what thoughts, reactions, emotions were brought up when you're reading this?
I will say, even though Shmi is very wise, clearly very strong in the force in this fic, it did kind of catch me off guard that Yoda immediately was like, be my Padawan.
Yes.
I was like, "Whoa." Like, she must have really had, like, a big impact on him. But, I mean, also on the other hand, like, once Yoda has his mind set on something, that's pretty much how it's gonna be, so
Yeah.
were you surprised by that at all?
I was not knowing what the fan fiction was about. I figured she'd be somebody's Padawan, but I wasn't sure who. I was not expecting Yoda. I think we both probably felt the same way that Dooku did in this and was like, what?
Another thing that really stayed with me as I was reading this is the way that the author portrayed that feeling of relief that Shmi has when she's freed and as she's trying to, like, adjust to having a free life. Like, there's a couple of scenes that I felt like this really came through, like, particularly the breakfast scene when Shmi's like, "Oh my gosh, I have all these options," and, like, I don't know I've never had these many options. I've never had to not worry about food before, like, and it's, like, such a foreign feeling to her that it's like it's relief at being free, but it's also kind of stressful in its own way too because she's just so, like, disoriented by all of the options that she has, like, her whole life in front of her now. And so I felt like that was just handled really well, and you can see how, like, this sudden freedom, it affects her life in a lot of ways.
It does. And the author does a great job humanizing these characters and not forgetting those little bumps along the road you're going to get when change happens.
Right. Like, it's not like, okay, change happens and there's no consequences for the characters, like, moving on. It's like, even if it's a
Right.
good change, there's still consequences to some sort of degree. There's still an adjustment of some kind that has to happen.
Right. And there's character development even in this little tiny fan fiction.
It's impressive when you can have character development like that in such a small piece like this.
And so smoothly done. Now, for me, as a mother, I connected well with this because a lot of these things that she's like imparting all of her wisdom on not just the adults but the children in this fan fiction, and these are some of the same lessons that I try to teach my kids. So I connected well with that character due to that. And I also really enjoyed seeing Anakin's reaction to everything. Like he was just so overjoyed and such like a 9-year-old boy. Like he's got 4 pieces of fruit, three pastries, and all this other stuff just on his tray. He's like, I'm gonna eat it all. And it's
Yeah.
it's it was hilarious to listen or read, because that is exactly what would happen.
I could also just totally picture, like, it was very, very easy for me to picture young Anakin. Like, I just felt like his voice and his way of doing things was just totally spot on.
So what was your favorite scene?
Okay, my favorite scene probably on I really liked the stuff with the Gungans. I liked the Captain Tarpal's appearance, and I liked how Shmi was like uh, she went with them to the scene that we see in Phantom Menace where they're trying to convince the Gungans to help them. Like Shmi is there witnessing all that. And I thought that was really cool. And it was like we see her doing that, and then there's like the part with the battle, and then we also get to see like how the Gungans honor the dead after the battle.
Yeah.
And that was something that was this author's interpretation is what I read in the author's notes at the end. And I thought that that was really cool. And I really liked like that creative little bit of lore that they threw in.
Yeah, and I liked how they compared it to how the people of Naboo also did their burial rites and how it was similar. And I thought that was a great little piece to put in there and show that like the same trends that we've gotten the entire fan fiction about balance and um harmony and what are the word they use, passion, but
Serenity.
that's it. It
Yes.
really did kind of go through this entire fan fiction.
Yeah, that's so true. Like it's you can see that theme like even in those details, which is awesome. I also thought it was funny too how Captain Tarpals like gives he's like, "Do you have like a weapon? Like you're a Padawan. Do you have a lightsaber?" She's like, "No." He's like, "Do you have a blaster?" She's like, "No." He's like, "Here, take this sling."
It's like, do you even know how to use a blaster? She's like, no.
And she's like, "A sling, I can use this. I know how to use this." So I thought
Yes.
that was just cute. I don't know. I just liked it.
When I read that, I was like, I am so looking forward to finding out what it is that she ends up using it on. Because it's like a solid amount of like foreshadowing. They're like, all right, she's got a sling. It's not just for show. Something's going to happen with that.
Yeah. I think we mentioned Dooku earlier when we were talking about characters, but when he came out of his like ship, did it surprise you to see him there? Were you expecting him to appear like that?
Not at all. I was not expecting that at all. I'm not sure it really added or anything to the. But you know what? They had to win somehow, and Anakin wasn't there. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that some other Jedi would have to show up. But no, that's not at all what I was expecting.
I thought for sure. I don't know if I just was thinking too much. I had my canon hat on, I guess, where when the ship shows up and they're like, "Did somebody like did somebody destroy the control ship?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Anakin's going to come out of the ship and he's going to be like, "I did it, mom." No, that's not what happened. And I was like it was like brain cannot compute. Like
Yeah.
like I
Yes. No, I
knew
had
that
the
this
same
was
feeling.
alternate universe, but for some reason it's still I was like, "Wait, what?"
Oh,
Yeah.
you know what? That might have been actually the part where my brain went, "Ooh, romance. She's gonna find the perfect person with the most fantastic ship," and maybe that actually happens afterwards. Like Tuku's gonna like it's gonna be enemies to lovers, and no, no, okay.
I think I'm still processing the Dooku appearance that that
And
it
he's
didn't
never
even
gonna
cross
turn
my
to the
mind.
dark side, or he will stop turning to the dark side, and everything will be lovely, all
Well,
because we brought a
usually
mom in.
usually if you're gonna ship Shmi with somebody, it would be Qui-Gon, but that's not an option here, so I think I just don't really know what to think.
Speaking of Shmi and Qui Gon together, that brings us into one of my favorite scenes, which is when she is giving him a good old mom talking to about like how he feels about Obi-Wan and potentially like leaving Obi-Wan for Anakin. And I love the talking to she gives him because he's hurt Obi-Wan's feelings, and that is just not acceptable. But she's not trying to be mean to him. She's just really trying to give him like a redirection, as we call it in the parent world.
I like that.
My other favorite scene though was when Yoda makes the famous do or do nah there is no try thing, and then he like turns to her and like gives her like a silent message of yes, yes, I know it's not you're gonna argue with me on this, but it's just a good philosophical force lesson. And like I love that they just addressed that, the fact that that's just such a silly line. And yes, absolutely she would argue with that.
Right, yeah, because she was very much like, if something didn't sound like, effective or reasonable, she would just, like, say it, which to me, like, makes a lot of sense because she has the life experience to back up her disagreements.
Yeah. And she was willing to go toe to toe with anybody, but
Right.
very nicely.
Like, can you imagine, like, the guts that it would take to, like, be standing in, like, the room of, like, the whole Jedi Council and to, like, disagree with them on, like, doctrine? Like, it'd
Especially
be
when they're
pretty
all yelling.
intimidating.
I don't want to, thank you.
Yeah. Just no comment. Yeah. Okay, so as you were reading this, did you have any questions come up that are staying with you?
How did you feel about Shmi having force powers and then or abilities, and that's how Anakin got his inherited his abilities?
To me, it does make sense that she would be force sensitive. Um, but that is okay. See, it's funny because I had a similar question that I was going to ask you, which is that is Shmi stronger in the Force than Anakin is in this fic? Because I get it that to me, like I could see her being force sensitive. That's not a hard leap for me to make. But I do have more of I don't know, I have to think about it more in terms of like in this fic, we don't really see Anakin using the Force much. And that could just be because it's not an Anakin centric story. So that
Yeah.
could just be the only reason why. But I was like, it's hard for me to picture her being stronger in the Force than Anakin is.
For this fan fiction, it certainly seemed like she was, because you have her as an adult knowing easily able to master force techniques that take a long time to do. But who knows, because we don't see Anakin grow up and like actually spend his entire well most of his life training. But she certainly did seem stronger than most of the other Jedi we read about. Why do you think the name is what it is?
Oh, that's a good one.
They
Oh
did
my
say
goodness.
wander a couple of times in the story, but like
I wonder if I'm thinking of like wandering the desert. Was there a line somewhere in here about wandering the desert? I feel like a lot of times when people are talking about wandering, there's usually some sort of wilderness component to that. And Tatooine is a
there
planet with a lot of desert wilderness.
there was one mention where she was talking about how sometimes slaves will run away, like, and then their masters will run out, and then sometimes they come wandering back, blinded by the sands.
Oh, yes. Oh,
I don't know.
that might be something. Yeah. I do kind of like it how sometimes fanfic titles can be kind of like mysterious.
Yes,
It
like
like it
song
makes it
titles.
yes, I kind of it's like fun. I don't know. It's like ooh, like it's like a metaphorical like I don't know, I
Yes.
like it. Okay, I have a question for you now. Do you think that Anakin still would have gone to the dark side if Shmi like, okay, if we're thinking in canon, like in canon, would Anakin have gone to the dark side if Shmi was there?
No, especially if Shmi was like she is in this fan fiction, she would have done a lot more guiding over the years and kind of bumped him and nudged him in the right direction wherever he needed it. Also without judgment, as unlike the Jedi and how they feel about attachment, she'd be able to have more of a understanding view of attachment and emotions. And already in in this fan fiction, you see her helping like Obi-Wan bring like teach Anakin how to control his emotions early. So I don't think so. I think it, but then again, in the will of the Force and destiny and all that, Maybe he's going to balance it some other way.
Yeah. It's like what you said about Destiny. That was kind of my thought was like, I do think that for him to be the chosen one, I felt like it was his destiny to go to the dark side and then to come back.
Yeah.
But also, even though I think Shmi in canon was a big part of his fall to the dark side, he also had issues before he lost Shmi too.
Yeah. But he didn't have his mom there to help him guide. He just had Obi-Wan, who was unsure of himself.
Doing his best, but the Jedi
Basically
didn't
a
really have the
Padawan, too.
resources. Yeah, and the Jedi didn't have the resources at this time, like, to deal with this. Like, they just kind of isolated each other. Well, and speaking of Obi-Wan, that was another thing I was kind of thinking of too, was like with with the way that Qui-Gon was portrayed in this one, I thought it was interesting how like in this fic, Obi-Wan was the right choice for Anakin, not Qui-Gon. Because, in canon, there's always this thing of like, well, what would have been if it was Qui-Gon that trained Anakin? Like, how would that have gone differently? But in this fic, it's like, well, thank God Qui-Gon didn't train Anakin.
Yeah. Yeah, that they really needed each other. And like I like that she threw in that like she could already see the bonds kind of coming together between
Yeah.
those two.
Yeah, so I did kind of like that perspective that like it was always meant to be Obi-Wan.
So is there any other thoughts you have?
I mean, I think that covers it for me. I really enjoyed this fanfic though. I liked this kind of like alternate universe slash Phantom Menace reflection sort of. I thought it was cool how it was like a combination of those two things, so that made reading it like really fun.
Yeah. I really liked the whole I guess this is a trope where like everyone lives, no one dies. That whole part of it.
Yeah, happy ending.
I'm a sucker for happy endings, so it was perfect.
Me too. I want everything to work out in the most beneficial way possible for everybody.
Absolutely.
That's how I like it. So next month, we are going to be reading Reflection by Fyre. And so Fyre is the name of the author. The title is Reflection. At first, I thought Reflection by Fyre was the full title, but so I wanted to clarify. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a cool title as well. But what this one is it is an original trilogy fanfic, and it's Leia and Anakin having a conversation. So I thought that'd be kind of fun because we haven't done an original trilogy fic yet.
No, we haven't.
Yeah.
Is it long? It doesn't.
No, it's not long. It's actually shorter than this one was.
Oh, all right. I'm excited. So. It should be an interesting perspective already.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that because, like, that whole forgiveness aspect of how is she going to forgive Vader / Anakin? That's something cool to explore.
Something we don't get much of in canon, too. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Also, I am putting our Instagram up on the screen. So we do post our recordings that we do on YouTube. So if you want to watch the recording, then visit our YouTube channel, One Hell of a Fanfic. And also, in addition to that, we post on Instagram like what we're going to be reading next and all of that kind of stuff. And our Instagram is at One Hell of a Fanfic with a period in between every word.
And like and subscribe to help us kind of grow our tiny channel as we work our way through the Star Wars fan fiction of the world.
Yes, as we go on this journey. Thanks so much for joining us at One Hell of a Fanfic. On this podcast, we discuss Star Wars fan fiction, but we do not own the rights to Star Wars or any of the written works we cover. We have no affiliation with Lucasfilm or the fanfic authors we credit for their work. For questions, please email us at onehellofafanfic@gmail.com.